On paper, the Skoda Kylaq seems to have the perfect recipe. Fundamentals borrowed from a car that sits a segment above and compressed into a sub 4 meter footprint. As a result, Skoda has been able to offer the sort of pricing it has never done before. To be fair, the Kushaq and Slavia are doing rather well. Put together, they sell close to 4,000 to 5,000 units every month. But with this, Skoda will be able to access a market that it has never accessed before. Let's look at the design now. Now, the Kylaq is of course based on the Kushaq, so there are a lot of similarities. But there are some subtle but very important changes that add quite a bit to the design of the Kylaq. For instance, you'd notice that there's no chrome here and the grille is rather flat. Now, this is part of a new design ideology that Skoda has, which is called modern solid, and the Kylaq is the first car in India that gets it. Up here you'd see these very thin narrow LED DRLs and the headlights have been moved lower down. The bumper too is a lot less fussy and overall it's a cleaner, simpler face. Moving to the sides, there are these attractive 17-inch alloy wheels on the top spec model. This is the Prestige variant after all. And the side itself is a lot cleaner. The profile is a lot cleaner. The only bit of chrome that you see is on the door handles here. Again, very different looking cladding. The cladding is a lot chunkier than on the Kushaq, so that adds a bit to the design. Mind you, the Kylaq is a little wider than the Kushaq, so it has a relatively more muscular stance. But in terms of the design elements, in terms of the character lines, they're a lot smoother, a lot cleaner. Towards the back, these character lines seamlessly meet the LED tail lamps. It's a very geometric pattern and looks really nice. There is this grey strip here with Skoda lettering and the bumper is pretty chunky. But to break up the monotony, there are these silver bits here which look really, really nice. Now that's all very, very good, but how is it to drive? I'm a little surprised by the Kylaq. I expected it to be a shrunken down version of the Kushaq in the way it drove and handled, but this feels very different. To begin with, the Kylaq has a stiffer body and that's a direct result of the shorter length. And that has allowed Skoda to have a softer suspension setup. That means that the Kylaq rides very well at slow speeds. It's fairly comfortable, rounds out small bumps and potholes very, very well. Unlike the Kushaq, which has a relatively firmer ride. But as speeds build up and as you start driving a little bit more enthusiastically, this has a fair bit more body roll and a bit more vertical movement to contend with. And that sort of nudges you to drive a little slower, which isn't what I was expecting from the Kylaq. The steering is still relatively accurate and the brakes have a good amount of bite, but there's not a lot of bite in the first few centimeters of travel and there is not a lot of feedback either. This is a car that likes being driven around in the city in a relaxed fashion rather than being pushed on the highway or on winding roads. But maybe I'm looking at this the wrong way. It starts at a relatively affordable price point, 7.89 lakhs for the base classic variant, and you get what is essentially a very good engine and gearbox combo. You get 5-star Bharat NCAP rating and you get a ride and handling balance which is just perfect for the city. I'm a fan of the 1-liter turbo petrol engine that's there in this car. It's the same that's found in other Skoda and Volkswagen cars in the country. And it's mated to the 6-speed torque converter that's again in a bunch of other cars from the Skoda VW group. And I quite like the package. It's 115 HP, 178 Nm. It's got enough torque for you to have fun and it still delivers a good fuel economy figure as well. The transmission too goes about its business unobtrusively. It's not the quickest, but there's paddle shifters for you to take control, and it feels very smooth and effortless to drive when you're doing like normal city speeds. A small complaint I have is that the engine does sound a little gruff. For instance, that is not very pleasant, but it's a 3-pot motor, so you know what you expect. But then again, there are some other cars in this segment that don't sound as gruff, and probably that adds to how pleasant and serene you feel in the car altogether. One worry that I had when I first heard of the Kylaq was that there'd be considerable cost cutting on the inside, given that Skoda wouldn't really compromise on build quality or safety, and they haven't really. This is a 5-star Bharat NCAP rated car. In fact, it's the safest car in its class. Now, on the inside, it looks very similar to the Kushaq. Now, the Kushaq itself doesn't really have the nicest of materials, and that sort of continues here as well. But there's an interesting mix of materials. There's a few textures as well, and that helps break the monotony. For instance, there's this dark grey plastic here. There's a lighter grey here. There's this green strip here as well. The AC vents are a little bit different as well. It looks pretty well put together. In terms of the features, there's things like wireless Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. There's a 10-inch infotainment display. There's an 8-inch instrument cluster, exactly the same as on the Kushaq. There's wireless charging. There's a sunroof, and most importantly, something that's a bit of a cool addition here is that there's powered and ventilated front seats, which isn't really common in the segment at all. One thing I'd like to point out here is that the Kylaq's cabin doesn't really feel that special, and some of it is down to the materials used. There's not a lot of soft touch plastics anywhere, and some of it is the execution of the cabin overall. Some cars in this segment do their cabins a lot better, and in terms of features as well, there are other cars which offer quite a bit more in terms of features, and which is something that a lot of buyers are swayed by these days. I'm in the back seat of the Skoda Kylaq, and there's not a lot to complain about. Of course, it is a shrunken cabin in terms of the Kushaq, but you don't really see a loss in space. There's decent headroom, decent shoulder room, knee room as well. The seat in front of me is set to my seating position, and there's cubbies around. For instance, one here. There's a space to store away your phone here. There's an armrest. There's Type-C ports and AC vents, and it does feel pretty good, pretty comfortable. The Skoda Kylaq is an interesting car. It is based on, of course, a car that sits a segment above, but it doesn't really lose out on anything as it enters the sub 4 meter segment. It is practical with a good amount of space for all the occupants and their belongings. It is safe, gets a tried and tested drivetrain, and it gets all the features that you'd consider essential in 2025. And it does look good as well. The fact that it gets a suspension setup tuned for comfort means that it becomes enticing to a lot of buyers who otherwise wouldn't consider a Skoda. And priced at rupees 14.4 lakh for this top of the line prestige variant, I think it makes for great value.